Welcome back, Football Friday edition of Birds 365. And there's my buddy Bob Brookover making his Birds 365 debut a day late, by the way. I screwed that up. I apologize, Brookie. My ego's too big. I assume everybody knows when my show is on. So I apologize.
I see it on YouTube.
Yeah. And people can watch it virtually. So anyway, thanks for hopping on. I think it's a unique perspective. Obviously, Philadelphia sports fans know Brookie from years being at the Inquirer, covering the Eagles and Phillies as well. But recently for NJ.com, and he's back covering the Eagles. You were up in North Jersey covering the New York Giants. So you have a unique perspective about one of the Eagles' top rivals. And I want to talk about the Giants a little bit as well from what they've been doing. But it's got to start with Saquon Barkley with Bob Brookover. And you've seen Saquon up close. I don't know anything who says anything bad about this kid. He's a great teammate, evidently, great leader. I've got to meet him a very small portion when he was introduced here. Seems like a class kid. Obviously coming out of Penn State, enormous talent, number 2 overall pick. That rookie season was just unbelievable. And then it hasn't been that great. It really hasn't, Brookie. And there's been a lot of excuses for Saquon Barkley in New York. And a lot of them are legitimate. Terrible offensive line, terrible quarterback play. But, you know, transitional players tend to make something out of nothing. Is he that type of player? Certainly at this stage of his career.
I believe he is. I mean, you referenced his rookie season, which was amazing, and he has not duplicated anything close to that. Although 2 seasons ago, he was the driving force behind the Giants going to the playoffs. I mean, he was 30-something% of their offense. He was the leader in that locker room. I was just so impressed by him in that season. And I didn't get to see him nearly as much last season because he got hurt in the 3rd game of the season, or 2nd game of the season. I'm sorry. Again, the very final series, Giants going a game-winning drive to beat the Cardinals. It looks like, okay, maybe they got things straightened out, and he gets hurt. The season goes in the tank. I was impressed from afar that he came back. Well, I was still there. He missed 3 games, and it was a high ankle sprain. And he was back in 3 games, and he didn't have to come back because at that point the team was a disaster. It was pretty clear they weren't going anywhere. They were 1-5, I believe. And he said, "No, that's not how I operate. If I can play, I'm going to play. I'm not going to nurse this thing." Again, just a sign of a leader to me. From what I was being in that locker room for, I don't know, a year and a half, and seeing what he meant in there, I'm really eager to see what it's going to be like in the Eagles locker room, because I do think he's one of those players that, the moment he walks in the locker room, all eyes go to him, and he can be an instant leader. I mean, maybe an example of that is Jordan Mailata when he was asked last week about, hey, what did you think when you heard that Saquon was coming to the Eagles? He's like, well, I was in a restaurant in Italy with my wife.
Yeah.
First, and she was like, what are you going on? We got Saquon Barkley.
Well, yeah. Right. Jordan, so, by the way, the F-bomb is not a rare occurrence with Jordan. He's trying
it is not, but probably in an Italian restaurant when his wife has no idea what's going on, probably a little rare then.
Now, to me, it's about the passing game because, Brookie, the Eagles have been pretty successful running the football. Miles Sanders turns into a Pro Bowl running back in 2022. DeAndre Swift is a Pro Bowl running back last season behind this offensive line. So at some point, you start to think, well, what we think Howie thinks about the running back position was turning out to be true. You can have success and cobble it together, especially with this offensive line, which loses Jason Kelce, but still projects to be certainly top 5 in the league. So from that standpoint, Saquon Barkley should even be better running the football. And that's a pretty high threshold because Miles averaged 4.9 yards per carry. DeAndre averaged 4.6. Those are numbers Saquon has reached once in his career, his rookie season. Now, again, supporting cast, that is a fair point of context to point in there. To me, though, and how he used the word special to describe Saquon, it's got to be about the passing game, right? To get
I think in two respects that's true. One is, he go back and look at that rookie season, and he had 91 catches. I forget the exact number of yards, 700 something yards. He led the league in yards from scrimmage that year. So obviously that's within him. I saw it within him. The game that comes to mind where he really, he scored a receiving touchdown against the Eagles in that last game last season, which was a pretty clear indication that that's still in him. I remember the game against the Packers in London 2 years ago. The Giants really exploited his ability to catch the ball in that game to beat the Packers in a game that nobody thought they could win. But I also believe, and it's funny because early in his career, Saquon was accused of all people, Tiki Barber, of not being a very good pass blocker. It was a game against Pittsburgh in particular, early in his third or fourth season, I forget which year, where he didn't have a good game. The Giants got beat up on offense, and Saquon turned himself into a very good pass protector, which is vital in this offense. And I'm not sure the Eagles were always very good at that out of the backfield, either DeAndre or
Kenny Gainwell, yeah.
Right. And even going back to Miles Sanders, I think Barkley can help in that respect. But even more so coming out of the backfield, being that threat on wheel routes and whatever, just short dump routes in the flat that Jalen really needs to take advantage of more than he has in the past. I think we're going to see more of that with this offense.
I think people look at Saquon's age because he entered the league very young. He's only 27. And you say, well, there's plenty of tread left on the tire for a 27. That 30 word is a dirty word in the NFL when it comes to running backs. So he's got some time before he hits that threshold. But I look at the touches, Brookie, and I say, this guy's touched the football 1,500 times in the NFL, about right on that cusp. And that's a lot of work. And that's, post ACL, which he had, I think, in year 3. And that's also a lot of those touches are on that MetLife turf, which is not very popular with players and takes a toll on the body, I would imagine, just from a wear and tear standpoint. Typically, and the Eagles went through this with DeMarco Murray, when you get all those touches and the descent can start quickly. Do you think the Eagles come into this saying, we think this guy has a little bit less and we're going to run him into the ground, that ugly side of football? Or do you think they think this is a multi-year type thing, and we want to sort of manage this?
Well, the way the contract is constructed, it's a 2-year deal. I mean, they can get out of it after 2 years pretty easily. No guaranteed money in that third year. So they're going to get at least 2 years out of Saquon. I can tell you, I did learn this. Saquon wants the ball. He's the feed me type of guy. So he's probably going to get it less because the Giants did not have outside receiver weapons. Darius Slayton's was a speed guy, but not a consistent, not an AJ Brown or Devontae Smith type, a decent receiver, be a great third receiver. But he never, after Odell Beckham left, he never had that with the Giants. There was never another guy who, you said, oh, well, they might give it to him instead of Saquon in a critical time. So he's going to not have to do as much. He's going to still want to do as much, if not more. And I'll, you referenced Christian McCaffrey earlier and said Saquon's not Christian McCaffrey, but Christian McCaffrey went to the 49ers and he was a very good, an outstanding back, one of the best in the league with the Carolina Panthers. but going to the 49ers and that talent around him unlocks something to another level beyond all other running backs in the league. Now, will that happen for Saquon? I don't know, but Christian McCaffrey was 27 years old last year. Saquon Barkley is 27. Christian McCaffrey had been beat up and missed almost
he had
huge parts of 2 seasons. And that's one thing I will say about Saquon. You know, he has this reputation of being a guy who is oft injured, but he's basically, except for the year where he tore his ACL in week 2, he's basically averaged 15 games a year. You know, maybe that goes to the negative part of what you're saying about he's been, you know, a lot of tread on his tires. Not much tread left on his tires, but I don't think so. I think it just goes more to the testament of this guy's ready to play when it's time to play.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, Christian has more touches than Saquon in his career, and you're right, similar age-wise, so maybe that does unlock something. I go back to that with McCaffrey, though. I go back to the 2019 season in Carolina, which was his last fully healthy season with the Panthers. They were decent because of him, but they weren't a great team. And that was the year he had 1,400 rushing yards, 15 touchdowns, 116 receptions. He was over 1,000 yards as a receiver in the same year, 1,000 yards rushing, 1,000 yards receiving. So to me, he's a little bit different. The Eagles, by the way, Brookie, had tremendous interest in Christian McCaffrey in 2017, which I'm sure you're aware of. Sure. He's sort of been the white whale, and they're trying to duplicate his presence. I just don't think there's a duplicate. And sometimes there is. I always argue one of the terms I hate as a writer is generational talent. We hear it so much. To me, once in a generation means once in a generation. And I think Christian's the one. And I think everybody else is fighting for 2. But that's just
if you got Christian Light, is that pretty good?
Yeah. Number 2 is not.
Saquon himself has said Christian's the best in the league.
Yeah.
But I've another side of Saquon I got to see in New York was the competitive side, where Saquon, if he thinks Christian is the best, that's the bar. His bar is set at Christian McCaffrey, who he wants to be. I mean, I saw my favorite story was the Giants had a receiver, Davis. His name is escaping me. He was like their 6th, 7th receiver. But he was the best player. Brian Dable in his first year brought a ping pong table, and Saquon stunk at the game. This kid Davis was the best ping pong player. By the end of the season, he had Saquon ranked third in the room. He said he could barely play the game. He said by the end of the season, Saquon wanted to be the best so bad that he was the 3rd best in the room, and he was able to. He said he can't beat me yet, but he can compete with me now. So
Pat Leonard told me a story about I don't know. They were arguing about who the better chess player was, and they
I was there for that.
It broke out the chessboard, and Saquon beat Pat. So Pat Leonard, but
that's a low bar.
Yeah, that's a very low bar. That's a very low bar. Now Pat's a good guy, but yeah, I've heard nothing but good things about Saquon Barkley like I said, from a competitive standpoint, leadership standpoint type of guy. I look at it from the Eagles' perspective and the way they usually do business, and this is not the way they usually do business. So it sticks out to me and say, what's different? And if Howie's right, Howie's right. If he's special, all of a sudden it looks great, and we'll see how that strikes out. But before we get back to the Eagles, I do want to talk about the Giants with you, Brookie, because, boy, I got to tell you, they've been a disaster basically since Cherry Reese and Tom Coughlin. And I thought they got it right early in the process with Brian Daboll and Joe Shane. I said, all right, Giants are starting to go in the right direction. And I don't know if I'm right now. Dayball's fighting with coaches and assistants, and I don't get the plan. Joe Shane trying to build the roster. Where are you on the Giants and how things have progressed under Brian and Joe Shane?
I thought he's a great question, but I thought even recently as the end of last year, that team was 2-8 when I stopped covering them. And I was like, what a disaster this team is. They won 3 in a row with Tommy DeVito. They finished with a win over the Eagles. The Eagles were at least trying a little bit. They were a disaster at that point. They were a worse team than the Giants at that point. But I said, all right. And then I start hearing all the stuff about Wink Martindale, what happened,
Yeah.
I knew some people there, just an absolute disaster. And then I wasn't aware of the Mike Kafka stuff. I thought they were pretty tight. And when I left there, but that's just does not bode well going forward. Now the question is, does Joe Shane have the power and the wherewithal to stay if he decides Brian Dable? He was obviously his guy. He's the guy who brought with him from Buffalo. Is it a package deal in John Mara's mind, or would they move on from Dable and keep Shane? But Shane's got to prove himself too. I mean, Shane's, he drafted a right tackle in Evan Neal, who he's going into his 3rd season here. And if it's as big a disaster as the first 2 have been, that's a major bust as a number 7 overall pick. In an area where the Giants are a disaster to begin with. Their offensive line is, as we talked about in referencing Saquon, just so bad. I mean,
yeah,
they had to bring back,
and they've tried to fix it. I mean, Thomas is a good player.
Thomas,
as you mentioned,
Thomas, the Giants season last year. And I'll just not too many people on Eagles Birds 365 want to hear about the Giants, but their first game of the season. I don't know if you're aware of this, but they go down the field, drive to like the 4-yard line against the Cowboys, have to a penalty, a false start penalty. I think might have been on Andrew Thomas, but forces him to try a field goal. The field goal is blocked, return for a touchdown. Andrew Thomas is hurt on the play, misses the next 8 weeks of the season. The kicker was also hurt, by the way. He kept kicking for a while, but never recovered. It was horrible. And that was just like right there. That just defined the whole Giants season. So yeah, Andrew Thomas is good. They try to fix it, but things happened with that team last year when I was covering it that I just never seen before. I saw an offensive lineman cry in the locker room 2 straight weeks because he had let his team down. I mean, the first time visibly just weeping because he was so disappointed in himself. I mean,
that's Andre Dillard like. I don't like to hear that.
It was just amazing, John. It really was. And so Joe Shane is, to put it really on the clock now, and it's amazing how things have unfolded for the Giants, that they're in this number 6 pick where they took Daniel Jones, who they thought had taken a step forward. They committed to him. They can get out of that, but now here they are back with the number 6 pick, and in quarterback, what do we do mode? Because of everything in front of them, it's just fallen not exactly right for them. I'm almost, if I'm the Giants, of the mind of, forget about the quarterback, take the best receiver, because that's something.
I'm with you. I'd be scared to death.
And you know what? And after that, I did a mock draft the other day with one of those simulated mock drafts that I've become addicted to. And in that draft, I wasn't drafting for the Giants. The Giants traded down with the Vikings and ended up taking 2 defensive players. And it's like, this isn't a bad idea. You build your defense, which is also already not too bad. Their best free agent move last year was getting Bobby Okereke, who was
he's a good player. He's
really good for them. Yeah. And all of a sudden, you build your defense. You got Brian Burns, you got Kayvon Thibodeau, you got Dexter Lawrence. You say, all right, we got our defense in place. Our offense needs work, but we're going to win some games just because our defense is going to be so good. And then, next year, focus on the quarterback, or, and also you get to see what Daniel Jones is for another year, the guy you signed anyway. So.
I would almost have to, you can't be scared, but boy, I'd be scared if I were the Giants to take J.J. McCarthy or somebody like that and trade up and have that kind of uncertainty. But we'll see how that shakes out. Now, you got back here and started covering the Eagles after that 2-8 start. You saw one of the greatest collapses in Eagles history.
5-14 for the year, John, was my record between the 2 teams, and outscored by 224 points. And so when I wasn't covering the 2 teams, they were 12-4.
So now we know. I've been talking on this show every day, Brookie, and said I cannot explain this collapse. I really can't. And now I can.
Me is as good an explanation
yeah.
as I've heard.
Yeah. It was amazing because, and they lacked some style points during that 10-1 start, the Eagles I'm talking about. But you know, if you look at the 2-year span, they were so good, obviously, in the Super Bowl season. They just found ways to win games. And all of a sudden, boom, that's over.
They beat the Super Bowl champions in Kansas City.
Yeah.
Let's not forget. And then a desperate Bills team the following week with Jalen Hurts being out of his mind good, I thought.
Yeah. I go back to Sean Desai. And people say Sean Desai was a joke and this and that and whatever you want to describe. I think people forget, at least early in the season, there were some signs. Tampa Bay, week 3, they were really good defensively. Second half against the Rams, after getting shredded, they were really good. They made some adjustments. Miami, who was the most explosive team in football, they stopped them at the time. And then all of a sudden the wheels came off. But what was most shocking to me, Brookie, so the Eagles were, I think, 8-1. I have to look it up at the bye week. Yep. But that's when they were thinking about changing defensive coordinators. Why in God's name would you think about changing defensive coordinators when you're having, look, there were some issues, no doubt about it. But why? Why would that even creep into your mind as a head coach if you're Nick Sirianni?
Yeah, I mean, and if you go back and Jeff McLean had the story later where they don't, I don't remember the exact week, but they had stripped him of his third down play calling duties. Right in that same time, even before they took away the whole play calling duties from him. I mean, it was insane in my mind. You just don't do that in the middle of the season. I came on the beat too late to know, to be able to extract information from guys who might, been more deeply entrenched. My teammate Chris was more entrenched, but that had to rub some guys the wrong way. Now, I've since heard people say, well, that they weren't on board with Desai, but
I keep hearing the word presence, Bob. You didn't have a presence.
Right.
Like, all right.
Right.
Well, I mean,
all right. That's fine. To me, that's just a move you make after the season. You don't make it in the middle of the season. I think you just invite chaos and disorganization when you do something like that. I did not like the move at the time. I still don't like it. I'm fine that they've moved on since then. I think Brian Johnson gets too much of the blame for what happened offensively. Both coordinators got too much blame. I don't know exactly what happened to that team. Something, defensively, they probably just weren't, and I'm not sure this is the same case for the offense, but defensively, they probably just weren't talented enough. And eventually that came to bite them. Slay goes down for the 3-game period. That's a killer for them. Bradbury just lost his way entirely. So, I mean, if you look at players, the linebackers started getting hurt, and, they weren't great linebackers to begin with, but they were playing pretty well. Morrow and Zach Cunningham were playing pretty well. And then all of a sudden they're hurt and not playing. And now you're relying on guys that Ben Van Zimmerman haven't even played. So defensively, especially the back end of that defense, and then on top of that, Jordan Davis starts not playing as well. Jalen Carter was lights out in the first half. He was still, I thought, okay. I still think he had a great rookie season, but not quite as great. The two edge rushers kind of disappear. So I mean, if I'm looking at why this team collapsed defensively, to me, it's just far more on the players than any coaching. You can say, oh, the scheme was different. Oh, they had Reddick dropping in coverage and all that.
Right, but by the way, that's the most overblown thing. He dropped 7 times against Arizona. That was his high point. And that's weird. Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't drop him 7 times, but I think that was so overblown. At Brook OB. Why is it at Brook OB on X, by the way? It should be.
It goes back to my days at the Inquirer, and that was kind of our sign-in at the Inquirer.
I got you. That makes sense.
Your last name. The start of your last name.
Yes.
So
Yes, that makes sense. So follow Bob on X, NJ.com. He mentioned with our buddy Chris Franklin, friend of the show, does a tremendous job. And before I let you go, I'll end it with those mock drafts you've been doing. You're addicted to them. So I want you to put on your Howie Roseman hat at 22 overall. My personal opinion is he ain't picking at 22. He's going up. He might go down. He might even trade it for a player, as he did with A.J. Brown. Um, what do you got? 22, Brookie, right now. 2 weeks. We're just under 2 weeks to go.
well, I'm with you. What would make anyone think that Howie's going to pick at number 22? I might move up for a guy like Quinyon Mitchell.
I love that. I love
Um,
Quinyon Mitchell.
yeah, I really think they need a cornerback. So let's just go with that. I think he's going to move up. Maybe have to move up 5 or 6 spots. Use maybe one of those second round picks, number 53 overall, to do it. And go get a cornerback. And if it's not him, I still think Howie's going to use one of those second round picks to move up a little bit and get the guy he really wants.
Could be an offensive lineman, which will excite everybody as usual. Not sexy, but that's the foundational principle of the Philadelphia Eagles. Brookie, thank you so much. I'm going to call on you again. Did a tremendous job, and I don't believe you were the bad luck for the New York Giants or the Philadelphia Eagles. But now I have an explanation to use.
Yeah, I'd go more with those defensive guys.
Yeah.
And Jill.
Yeah. Thanks, bud.
All right. Thanks, John.
Yeah, Brookie made a tremendous debut on Birds 365. We're going to tap into him now that he's back covering the Eagles for many years, doing great work at the Inquirer. And we're going to put an end to the week. I don't want to say bow on the show as deference to Jody McDonald, but more Birds 365 after the break.